exploring big data, insights and philosophical implications. Hello friends, it's time once again to delve into the books I've recently explored, with our theme today being big data. We'll discuss how we gather data, interpret it, and transform it into information as we perceive it. We'll also consider how this process can sometimes lead us astray philosophically. The first book I'd like to share is Yevgeny Morozov's To Save Everything, Click Here. This book is incredibly rich and dense, packed with a multitude of ideas. Broadly speaking, it delves into the philosophy of technology, but it also includes fascinating sections on historiography and the history of technology. One particularly inspiring part discusses the printing press, which influenced my YouTube video. The book also examines concepts like openness and transparency, questioning whether they are always beneficial. I concur with Morozov that we sometimes risk idolizing these concepts, treating them as ultimate goals rather than means to make governments or power structures more open and transparent, thereby facilitating change. He highlights how some entities claim to be open and transparent without providing ways for people to influence what's happening. This reminds me of a point made by Sara Ahmed in The Cultural Politics of Emotion, where she discusses how organizations might publish their racial diversity statistics and boast about their transparency without addressing the underlying lack of diversity. She argues that merely documenting a problem is not the same as tackling it. Morozov's book strongly critiques what he terms solutionism, the belief that all problems can be solved with the right technology, algorithms, or systems. He warns that some problems cannot be solved so neatly and that our approaches will inevitably have both positive and negative outcomes, with unpredictable results. I also found the sections on technology creation intriguing. When you create a tool or technology, you assume the conditions that make it necessary, as envisioned by its creator. For example, imagine developing an app that monitors available space in homeless shelters and informs homeless individuals about nearby shelters. While this seems like a technological solution to homelessness, it presupposes that the issue can be addressed solely through technology, potentially overlooking deeper systemic issues. The underlying factors that lead to homelessness are often overlooked, and instead of questioning these root causes, we tend to accept them without much thought. As someone who spends a significant amount of time online and earns a substantial portion of my income through the internet, I found this book to be a truly thought-provoking experience. Now, I don't mean challenging in the sense that it's hard to read, quite the opposite, it's very approachable and easy to follow. Rather, it challenged me by prompting deep reflection on my own actions and work. For instance, I host a series called The Philosophy of YouTube, which some of you may have watched a few episodes of. This book, particularly its section on historiography, the study of how history is written and interpreted, made me rethink my approach to discussing the internet and its impact. It was a gift from a fan of the show, Stephen, with Gina, who picked it out from my book wish list. A huge thank you to Stephen, this read truly opened my eyes and broadened my perspective. Next, I want to talk about an absolutely fascinating book sent to me by Dustin Simmons, a longtime supporter of the show. It's The Rhetoric of Economics by Deirdre McCloskey, and it's a real gem. McCloskey's main argument is that fields like science, and economics in particular, can be analyzed as forms of literature. In other words, she views scientific discourse as a type of communication that's not just about presenting facts but also about persuading an audience. This applies not only to face-to-face discussions but also to written works like research papers and articles. For example, she examines some of the most influential economics papers from the 20th century and analyzes them through a literary perspective, pointing out things like the metaphors authors use, the tone or voice they adopt, and the techniques they employ to convince readers of their arguments. I found the sections on statistics particularly eye-opening, especially the way people often misunderstand statistical significance, a technical term, by assuming it means something is automatically important or relevant to everyday life. McCloskey also compares the language and style of mainstream economics with that of Marxist economics, highlighting how their differing approaches to concepts like value make it hard to reconcile the two. This book is quite accessible, even for beginners, and while it does include some tables and data, it's not overwhelming. If numbers and charts intimidate you, don't worry, you're not alone, and I sometimes feel the same way. Thankfully, the book is far from dry, it's actually quite engaging and even entertaining at times. I wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone interested in economics or communication. Finally, I want to highlight A Fatal Invention by Dorothy Roberts, a book that dives into the concept of race and its applications in fields like medicine, pharmacology, and even the surveillance industry. What I appreciated most about this book is its depth. It's packed with detailed case studies and thorough analyses of data, which really helped me grasp the complexities of the topic. For example, Roberts critiques DNA testing companies like 23andMe, which you've probably heard of. These companies allow you to send in a DNA sample, and in return, they provide a breakdown of your genetic ancestry, such as what percentage of your genes are Asian or European. However, Roberts points out a major flaw in this approach. It assumes the existence of a pure person, someone who is 100% of a particular race or ethnicity, which is a myth. No such person has ever existed, and this oversimplified view of genetics can reinforce harmful stereotypes. Instead, she advocates for a more nuanced understanding of human diversity, one that doesn't rely on outdated or scientifically inaccurate categories. This book is a must-read for anyone interested in the intersection of science, society, and ethics, and its detailed examples make it both informative and compelling. Let's delve into the concept of how certain genetic traits are often associated with specific racial groups, not because they are exclusive to those groups, but due to historical and political contexts. For instance, certain genes are statistically more common among people who, for historical reasons related to courtesans and societal norms of a particular era, have been categorized under specific racial labels. This naming convention, as noted by Morozov, reflects our tendency to create tools, like racial categories, and then shape our understanding of the world to fit these tools' utility. This idea recurs in discussions about pharmaceuticals. An example given is the misperception that black children are genetically predisposed to asthma. If a study, perhaps not entirely rigorous, supports this notion, it opens up a lucrative market for marketing asthma medications to people of color and black children. Conversely, investigating environmental factors such as higher levels of airborne irritants in neighborhoods with larger black populations, and addressing the underlying social issues, would be more challenging and less profitable. This illustrates how the tools we create can sometimes blind us to alternative perspectives on the problems they were designed to solve. The book also explores the historical construction of racial categories. For example, the legal category of Asian was essentially invented in the late 19th and early 20th centuries through statutes and court decisions, primarily to regulate immigration to the United States. The history of American eugenics is another fascinating aspect covered. Additionally, the book sheds light on the limitations of DNA evidence, which many laypeople assume to be infallible in court. The author discusses several cases where DNA evidence was misidentified, mishandled, or led to false positives. This raises concerns about the reliability of government DNA databases, especially when DNA is collected from individuals who have not been convicted or even charged with a crime. Routine DNA collection from people stopped by the police, for instance, is expanding these databases without ensuring the evidence's absolute reliability. Overall, the book provides a nuanced and critical examination of how genetic, historical, and social factors intertwine to shape our understanding of race and its implications in various aspects of society. It's important to recognize that certain practices can lead to unintended, yet significant, consequences. For example, let's consider the role of law enforcement agencies, whether they operate at the local or national level. If these agencies are found to be arresting individuals from minority groups at a disproportionately higher rate compared to others, this will inevitably result in their DNA being overrepresented within the system. Consequently, this overrepresentation increases the likelihood that these individuals will be disproportionately impacted by false positives in DNA matching, such as those that can occur with something called the Colpitts method. This concept was brought to light in a book I read, which was generously gifted to me by a viewer named Sebastian Oakes. I'm a huge fan of engaging with my audience, so thank you very much, Sebastian. The book, while quite unsettling and even a bit frightening in its implications, was truly insightful and thought-provoking. I'll make sure to include links in the video description for anyone interested in exploring these books further. You'll also find a link to my personal wish list there, in case you're feeling generous and would like to contribute to my research materials for the show. For those of you who have been tuning into my recent episodes, you might have noticed that some of the core themes discussed in all three of these books have been making appearances. This just goes to show how profoundly what I read can shape the content and direction of the episodes I create. It's like a continuous feedback loop between my reading habits and the topics I explore on the show. Thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to connecting with you again in my next video. My Patreon page, which you can find at patreon.com/philosophytube, is essentially what keeps the lights on and food on the table for me. If you enjoy my work and would like to see me continue creating content and, well, staying alive, you can consider signing up to make a monthly donation there. Every contribution, no matter how small, is greatly appreciated and helps me keep doing what I love. It's incredibly kind and generous of you,